If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back here. We have Kim Zocher. Zocher. I do apologize to you, sir. He's here. He had a splendid military career. I'm going to ask him about the Scottish Highlanders. I believe you were there as well. I want to know about that story about the skirt and what's underneath it. But we're going to get to that. For now, Kim, you are most welcome to us. Thank you. You've been here before in a certain sense because Frans Fourie, your great friend, has mentioned you. And now you are here. Tell me, where do you come from? How did you end up in the South African Army? Tell me the story.
Hi to everybody. Yeah, I was born in Rhodesia. The first, we were 5 boys. The first 3 boys were born in Rhodesia. Then we moved to South Africa. My youngest 2 brothers were born in South Africa, in Cape Town. From a young lad, from about, I think when you start Cub Scouts, I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. I was at Cub Scouts and I went right through Scouts to Scouts as well until I was 18. So I had being the oldest of 5 boys in Scouts, experience about leading people, leading my patrol in Scouts and things like that. And I didn't actually want to go to the military, but when I was at school and I was 16, I signed the papers. By the time I finished school, I didn't want to go, but I had to go. And it was only 1 year of national service. Or it was actually nine months when we signed in school. And by the time I went, when I finished matric, it was 1 year. And ended up at 1 South African Infantry in Bloemfontein. And they had new bungalows there. The new bungalows, when they were designed, as you came into them, there were little rooms on the right for the NCOs that were supposed to sleep with the troops. Then the defense decided, no, the leader group were not allowed to sleep in the same bungalows as the troops. So when we arrived at the bungalow, I got one of these rooms because it was the only one that was left when I got there. And so I actually had a private room to myself through my entire basic training. After a couple of weeks, some of the other guys were moaning that some of us had these private rooms and the other had this huge bungalow with about 60 guys sleeping in this huge bungalow. So then what they said is, okay, the guys with the 6 best inspections on a Saturday can have the rooms. I never lost my room. I had it through the entire basic training, but that just became through my experience of being a Boy Scout and things like that. I just knew how to then make things straight. In Boy Scouts, your tent had to be picked and all the pegs had to be in a perfect line. So for me, it was very natural. I then didn't volunteer to go to infantry school, as I said, because I'd failed matric and was one of the things. And my lieutenant came in and insisted that I go to infantry school and write a sub for my matric. So that is how I ended up going to infantry school. And yeah, and then I ended up in the Foxtrot company. In Foxtrot company, we were a little room in the old Second World War bungalows. We went in the new bungalows and we had quite a nice little room of 10 people there. Of those 10 people, there are 2 guys that I'm still friends with today. A guy called Tim Stewart, who became an officer at Parabats, and he was also a world champion triathlete in his time. And the other one is Eben, what's Eben's surname? Anyway, Eben's from the Northern Cape, Eben Swanepoel. And we were still from that same room, and Eben and I ended up in 32 Battalion as well. And Louis Botma was also in the other side of our platoon and also ended up with Louis Botma in the thing, and also very good friends with Louis Botma. And if I pass Bloemfontein, you've got to go past his house and have a good cup of coffee with him when we used to drive up. So yeah, I've also got some great friendships that are still, after all these years, very, very strong in the thing. So yeah, those are a couple of the guys, say Tim Stewart, Louis Botma and Eben Swanepoel are guys that were from my original room and still friends with today. Yes, then infantry school arrived, and I stayed there as an instructor, but I also specialized in anti-tank. So when I went into the anti-tank, it was called the 106 gun. We were trained in as a troop. So then when I stayed, the first phase I had troops in, the special phase I went over to the anti-tank again. But in the meantime, the South African Defence Force had bought a missile system secretly through Israel. And we were trained on this missile system called the Milan in those days. And I was a Milan instructor as well. So after the basic training phase, I was giving training on these weapons to the citizen force and the permanent force people. I wasn't giving it to troops. I was specialized in that. And it was quite boring because you just had a Monday to Friday job. You were free on whatever, and I enjoyed being with the troops. And then they came along and they were looking for people for 32 Battalion. And myself and a very good friend of mine, Etienne Penta, we both volunteered and we made it into 32 Battalion. And yeah, and that was into 32 Battalion. In 32 Battalion, I was there as an anti-tank person, but there wasn't actually any anti-tank. There were couple 106 guns standing around, that's all it was. And the support troops, our platoon and the mortars, we then became mainly involved with trooping the companies in and out with the Buffaloes. They came from Buffalo to Amahoni, and Amahoni we did the trooping, bringing the troops in and picking the troops out. It was a lot of work putting the troops on these convoys. And then they speeded up the system later when they started bringing the companies in and out of helicopters. It changed all these days because to troop in and out, you had to sweep the roads for the mines in the road first, and it was a very long story. Although we also used to supply them with food, which also started happening by helicopter. They got more rations delivered, and they used to bunker it in a hole, and then they used to go back to the hole and take take their food out of it. So that was the time at 32 Battalion, and it was great. And the brotherhood is still very strong today. After 32 Battalion, my citizen force regiment was Cape Town Highlanders. I arrived at Cape Town Highlanders and I didn't want to give my beret into the Cape Town Highlanders because some of the ex-32 guys had managed to do a deal with their citizen force regiment that they would still do all their camps at 32 Battalion. And then the 2CI, I can't remember his name, and Cape Town Highlanders took me to an office and said, please, they need people with experience. Won't I try it out with Cape Town Highlanders first? And if it doesn't work, he will guarantee that I can do the rest of my camps with 32 Battalion. And then I actually enjoyed working with the citizen force in Cape Town Highlanders, and I spent a lot of years with Cape Town Highlanders. I can't remember exactly, it was 17, 18 years, doing various camps, training courses, and from there I did my what is the main course to become a sergeant major? It was at Luatla. And then I was the mechanized company sergeant major training. So yeah, I went right up to that and went into the mechanized warfare side of things, riding around in rattles and things like that. And then I went to the citizen force and did various camps. And they changed over the years. At the first, they were border camps for things like that, training camps. And then that fell away, and then we started doing, in Cape Town, there was a lot of trouble between the Muslims and the Coloureds and the township, so we was doing township duty. And we also did a couple of camps up in Port Elizabeth and East London with a township thing. That township was not fun at all. It was just at night patrolling in the buffels. You weren't nicely protected. They would, from behind the houses, they'd throw rocks through the air like hand grenades, and they'd land on top of your helmet in the buffalo. And you weren't allowed to react to anything. So it was not a great situation doing that. Yeah, so that is where it went. And as I say, also attended some fantastic parades in Scotland with our mother regiment, the Gordon Highlanders. I did a colour parade there and a couple of other parades, and was very, very good with the Gordon Highlanders, our mother unit. Yeah, that was basically my career. And then I got to Europe and obviously not involved when I started here in 2000. And then in Europe, in 2004, there was a little guy called Frenchy. He was a Belgian guy who did some time in 32 Battalion. He got hold of 32 Battalion, said, are there any other guys from 32 living in Europe? And that is how they gave him my name. And then I had names of 1 or 2 other guys. And this little small group of, it differs between about 8 or 10 of us, we started meeting in a town called Ypres. Because Ypres on the 3rd of November has a parade every year for the signing of the Versailles Treaty. And so all the regiments from all the colonies used to come then. It was a great parade and meeting up, etc. But it was a First World War thing. But it was a good excuse for us to get together and join the parade. Yeah, and Frenchy who's not with us anymore, unfortunately, but he was the guy who basically kicked off the European little group in Europe and got that rolling. No, and we're still a small group. In the last couple of years, we also have quite a well-known guy, Willem Rutter, who lives in Germany. So we drag him with his bicycle to join us as well sometimes at meetings. And Willem's also a great guy to have here. It's quite a privilege to have him here in Europe with us as well. No, so that's basically the story of me and my working with the veterans and the various regiments in my life. So it goes from a kilt to camouflage, a bit of color in my life.
If I may ask you, where does the name Kim comes from? Because, you know, there was a famous British spy with that name, Kim Philby.
Kim was actually a man's name, and it's actually an Asian name. And when my mother was pregnant, she read a book by Rudyard Kipling called Kim. And it was a little boy who traveled by himself through India, and she took this name. Shortly after that, there was a famous actress, supposedly in America, who took the name Kim Novak. And that's when girls started taking the name. But the original from this name, it's an Asian name and it's a men's name. It's got nothing to do with the girl, but in America and this side of the world, it's now become a girl's name.
Well, yeah, those are fantastic books of Rudyard Kipling. I read many of them myself, actually all of them. Okay. I mean, if you really want to read good books, those are good. Some people say they're politically incorrect these days, but you know, they were written many, many years ago, decades ago.
It was life then.
Yes, that's how it was in his famous poem on the Khyber Pass, I believe.
Yeah.
No, that guy really could write. But I have a question about the kilt, which some people call a skirt, and I will not do that in the presence of a Scottish soldier. This kilt story, it's an age-old question. What are you wearing underneath it?
I won't tell you. And the answer to get someone who wants to know, the story goes, it depends if there's a king on the throne or a queen on the throne as to whether you wear underpants or not. And you can look that up and find out what it is. So yes, it's sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. It depends on the king or the queen.
Well, in all seriousness, you know, many of the lads here were telling me when they're doing long patrols on the border and they're out for weeks, they weren't wearing underpants anyway.
No. No, we never did. You just got rash with it. It was far more healthy to actually walk without underpants. You couldn't keep them clean. You couldn't wash them. They are all the patrols. We never wore underpants.
Perhaps I can ask you this question because quite a few females wrote to me to ask me about personal hygiene, you know, taking a number 2 there in the field. I know there's a procedure for it, but perhaps you can explain to me what happens if you know really have to go. Do you get a mate to go with you to protect you?
Not really. I think you just walk across to a bush, probably 50 or 100 meters away, and do your thing and come back. You know, you'd have a rifle and the guys. It was generally when the guys went down for a rest. But I also think in most of lives, my experience was that most guys either went in the evening to do the number 2 or in the morning. During the day, it was never an issue, basically. It was either some guys went early in the morning or some guys went late at night before they went to bed, basically. So you took a spade with you, went out, made a hole, came back to the bevy, etc. So, but obviously depending on where you are. But I wasn't involved in that much going out with the companies and that. I got involved when whole companies went, not platoons. When I started in 32, it was only platoons that were going, and then we had some big company operations, and then the mortars and the anti-tank came with. The anti-tank, obviously we didn't have any weapons. The anti-tank came with, and we were basically the donkeys helping the mortars carry mortar bombs, because each guy could only carry about 4 mortar bombs with his whole pack with him. So that's basically what we did, was supported the mortar platoon in the things by carrying bombs, being donkeys and being guys with rifles on the patrol. Yeah, that was sort of that side of it when it got, but then it got more conventional with helicopters and all sorts of things. We didn't have helicopters in those days. By that stage, I'd left the army.
I was told that when Echo Victor arrived, and we are trying to interview the General Eddie Viljoen, and we wish him the best of health. He had an operation which was successful, thank God. We're really grateful for that. But as soon as he feels better and there's no pressure, we will speak to him. But it seems to me, from what I've heard of several members of 32 Battalion who were speaking to me, is once he arrived, it became a bit more regimental, a bit more civilized. Would you agree to that?
Yes. There were guys walking around in uniforms that weren't sort of proper. He wanted you to be in proper browns, and at certain times you came to the mess with your beret and things like that. So he got that sort of, but that's, you're talking about a very early stage. You're talking about in the 80, 79, 78, before it was sort of really organized. It was getting it organized, but he started getting it organized. There were proper instructions, there were proper company organized and things like that. And he really got that side of it really, really organized in the regiment, because at that stage they were still back. It was just a lot of troops who ended up coming back with Colonel Breitenbach, and they were intense at that stage, and they started a village and things like that, and they put up wooden houses and things that started developing into a proper, for all sorts of means, and more of an organized situation.
Now, I spoke to many of you who went through the School of Infantry, and it seems to me that's where the infantry gets created. And we're going to talk about you and Frans Fourie in the infantry school. But was it quite a shock on your system when you arrive at a place like 32 Battalion, where it's a bit more, I don't want to use the word less organized, but, different, very, very different?
Yeah, you see, it was a big surprise for an instructor from infantry school, where your beds had to be made and everything had to be perfect. And it was other priorities there. Priorities there were your weapons and your troops and everything. You're not standing inspections and having the best polished boots and things like that. But both of them in your life of discipline are needed. But yes, it was a very two different situations completely. In the two situations, they had disciplines for different sort of things when you're being at infantry school and being the perfect soldier on the parade. And the other one is being what you have to do operationally. So both are required and both have their need.
While you were talking, I was just thinking to myself here that it actually takes a very disciplined person to be alone and still do those things, what he should be doing, what he was trying to do.
Yeah, who? I didn't get the name. Who did you mention? I didn't get the name.
No, I think it takes a very disciplined person to go and do what he should be doing without being checked all the time by his superiors.
Oh, definitely, yes. Yeah.
Do you think that just anybody could have survived at 32? Or did you need a special type of character?
I think you needed a special character. There were a couple of guys who did put their hand up and say, sorry, this is not for me, and they did go. No, I think it was, I think you just definitely needed some sort of character to stay there. It was hard work. The other regiments, as far as I know, when we were going through the board, if I remember correctly, they were going on 3-day patrols and things like that. And our guys were out there for 6 weeks getting rations every Tuesday. There was a huge difference between the way we were operating and then, it was also interesting. I ended up, as just part of the anti-tank platoon, but I ended up staying at Amaoni as the NCO in the base, and then doing a lot of supply runs into, before the helicopters were doing it, we were doing it by Buffalo. And that sometimes took you 2 or 3 days out to go to all the 2 platoons and give them their rations. And the worst thing you could do is arrive with rations and not have the post from the HQ with you. Most of the guys were more interested in the post than they were in the food. Till you understand what gold meant, that letter coming from home, unless it was a Dear Johnny, there was nothing greater than getting post in the bush. And if you didn't manage to get the post, the guys were really pissed off with you because you didn't bring post with you. And I remember one time, one of the platoons, the troops wanted a pair of boots because his boot was broken. And I brought up the rations and I didn't bring boots with me. And I had a huge clash with a sergeant of that platoon. And he was 100% right in what he did, crapping all over me, because to walk around the bush with broken boots must have been a nightmare. And I was slapgat. There were no boots in the store, but he said I should have stolen a pair of boots somewhere, and he's right, I should have. Stolen. So, yeah, there was a mistake, and I admit it. And he was right in crapping on me because I didn't get a pair of boots up to the guys in the bush.
It seems to me that the leader group was really very loyal towards the Angolan soldiers.
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. They were just like normal great soldiers. They come with experience, and they were fighting because they were against whatever the politics were in Angola. So they had another motivation as to being sent up there from South Africa to do a camp to stop the guys coming over the border. Their motivation was very, very different.
Well, the entire 32 Battalion, I'm not sure if it can ever be repeated, because they were operating behind enemy lines, so to speak, all the time. And they could, because they were locals under South African command in the beginning, and afterwards they started commanding themselves as they went through the ranks. As you say, for 6 weeks at a time and even more, and they were always spearheading whatever was happening. It was a totally unique unit.
No, but I don't think you could have done it with normal national guys doing their national service. You know, they had another motivation with politics. Having to done what they did, you couldn't do it. They say the normal guys go on the border. They were on for 3-4 day patrols. They were back for 2 or 3 days. They wanted to shower, they wanted to get food, and they wanted to get out again. And that is the way the normal regiments, and most of the normal regiments, operated on the border. Obviously, not including 32 Battalion. And then obviously, I have no idea what the Special Forces did and how they did it. I have no knowledge of all their things that they did. They obviously did it totally differently.
Well, I can tell you, I was speaking to Eswe Foré when we were writing his book, Sierra Whiskey. And he told us about an incident where he was supposed to go and fetch some supplies. And I don't think it came by helicopter. I think it was parachuted down. He said he drove about 3 days out to find it. And then they came back deep in Angola, deep behind enemy lines with UNITA. And he saw some little bag there and he thought, well, this ain't food, so he doesn't care, put it there next to a tree. And 3 days later, he's back at, with his mates. But they're very happy with him because they've got steaks now and they've got the food. And then headquarters asked him, why are you not responding to the mails, to the letters we've sent you? And of course, that's where they turned quite ugly, and SVA had to go back 3 days again to go and find that little bag with the letters which he left behind the tree. And by the grace of God, he actually found it and he brought it back, and they were very happy. So now I need to ask you, when you go out and you meet the platoons, how does the letter giving work? Because in the police, you would do push-ups for that letter. You're not just going to get it. It was fun, it wasn't meant to be humiliating. It was just the way we were doing things.
At infantry school, that happened, especially when there were kisses or that sort of thing. I think the guy would get punished more because he had nice kisses on it, whatever. But in the operational area, I cannot remember everything. When the post came out, you basically gave it to the platoon sergeant and he sorted it what he did with the platoon, I don't think he did push-ups at that stage. Everybody just got their post and went on with it. There was too many important things to worry about push-ups for a letter at that stage.
No, quite right. Of course, it's serious stuff. It's operational. I wonder if people listening here, watching us, can remember those little messages, those codes on the letters. Do you remember it? Box and kisses galore all over you or something. We had this little thingies here, and then they perfumed it at sometimes, and perfume obviously doubled the push-ups.
The only one I remember was swang, sealed with a nice kiss.
That's absolutely true. And then there were these guys who got about 10 letters from 10 different girls at the same time. I mean, and they were not even attractive fellows in my eyes, but I mind you, they did have hair, unlike me. And most of them had blue eyes, like you, and blonde hair. But they had the way about them. I mean, it's just quite fantastic.
I've still got all my letters from when I was on the border. I still have every single one, and yeah, from a couple of different ladies that were sent to me. But I still have every single one of them with a stamp that it was checked, because I used to read through them to see that there was no information to like edit the thing. So unfortunately, it didn't bother me, but yeah, your letters. No, the letters you sent home were edited. Sorry, not the ones you got. What you got is as long as you weren't sending enough. The ones you sent home were edited. Yeah.
I must ask you what your wife has to say about the fact that you kept all these souvenirs, all these letters.
Oh, she doesn't mind at all. She doesn't mind. I think because we met when we were so much older, and it's even a situation when I was back in Cape Town for the Argus cycle tour, and I met one of my exes for lunch. I told her, you know what I'm saying, and she told me about her. When you're older, it's not like when you're young, and it's obviously you realize it's part of your past, and no problem with it at all. And even when we've been together in Cape Town, my ex has joined us for lunch in Cape Town, and she's remarried, she's got a daughter. I think it's just when you're younger, it's this jealousy thing. When you're older, you're accepted that there's something in the past.
Well, that's a grown-up thing you said, and I think we can learn from that. I mean, that is good advice. But let's go back to School of Infantry, because you had that outstanding student there, Corey. And I know you two are very good friends. Can you tell me a little bit about the man?
Wow. I say his first advantage, he was older. The next thing, you will not break that man down. You can put him on 2x4 runs to have to rerun it, go and fetch the slow guys at the back. He was so fit and so motivated. You cannot break that man for anything. No, he also told me a story that when his brother was in the army and they got their first pass, and he was also a top student, he took his pass till the last one and said, sorry, that's everybody, you haven't got a pass. You're staying here, you're not going home for the first pass. And he told me that story. I did exactly the same with him. I gave all the troops, you check their uniforms and see that they're right, and you gave them their pass. And he was the last man standing. And obviously the other guys couldn't believe it. He was the top, they all knew he was the best, he was the tidiest as ever. And then we had a good laugh and we sat on the bed and I gave him his pass and I said, I had to do to you what your brother said happened to him in the army. And that was also something that Frans and I did. Yeah, so one of the great friendships. Yeah.
Yes, we were his corporal actually.
Yep, that's it.
And then he got abused on his birthday.
Yes, 21 push-ups for his 21st birthday. Yeah.
It was during that. Yes, because the School of Infantry, I believe, had this march at the end of a course.
Yeah, it's called the Vastbyt 5. And whether you're doing the January or the July course, there are different mountains around Oudtshoorn and they've got different places. It's called Vastbyt 5. You're out for 5 days and you've got to do this hike and everything to get through it. Well, it used to be in our time.
And then both of you ended up in Free-Coup.
Yes. And I'm not sure that I knew he was at 3-2 because I was selected after all the troops were selected. Because they first spoke to all the troops and then the commanding officer was in the office and he was looking for some of the corporals. And then I went to the office and I spoke to him. I said, I'm not infantry, I'm anti-tank. And he said, I need anti-tank, you're coming with me. So that is why I went and I spoke to myself. At that stage, a very good friend of mine had lost his rank, and he was being treated as a troop. And I then told him about this ex-corporal who was now a troop, building the obstacle course in infantry school. Had he interested in this sort of guy? He's a top trooper, and he said, yes, bring him here. And that good friend of mine was then taken to 32 Battalion, Etienne Fenter. He got his stripes back, and he became a sergeant before I did at 32. And he was a great mortar sergeant, Etienne. And yeah, and we were good mates as well. And he also came. I got him to go to 32, and that also kicked him off back into getting his rank and everything.
It's fascinating to me when I speak to the Special Forces people, and they are all legends. I mean, I don't care what they did there. These people are different from us, from me anyway. They all say to me, I have to speak to the guys who supported them. And they all bring honor, and they bring what's the word, honor, to these guys. So I need to know, if you have to go out and supply these platoons, how does that operation work? I mean, do you load your vehicles and you get there first and they get to you at the RV point, or do you drive right up to them? What's the security like? How do you plan such a thing? What do you do?
Basically, we'd have a whole lot of biffle convoys. The biffle at the back and the biffle in front would have troops on it. The other biffles would have the driver and one troop, and the rest of it would have all these rations. And then we'd go to the different platoons and give them their rations in those days. And because it was such a big supply, they would have to put a lot of the rations underground. They'd bury it and come back to it. What they would also do with their rat packs, some guys would sort out because they didn't eat this sweet or they didn't eat tuna fish or whatever, so they'd swap things with each other and just say and then they would have to bury some of it because they couldn't carry 14 days worth of rations. So some they would bury near to where we delivered it. They'd carry some of the cases somewhere else and put a second one, and they'd cache them away. But that it wasn't needed later when they were supplied with helicopters. That fed out. Basically the helicopter dropped, they kicked the rations out and whatever else they'd ordered. If they said I needed plaster because of this or something else, that would also go out to the helicopters and they'd drop it. So the helicopters were far more efficient and quick and getting the rations out to the guys, and they didn't have to carry it and bury it and things like that. So in the beginning, it was quite a thing to get the rations out, and it took days. It took about 3 or 4 days to go to all the companies of the buffaloes and get all the way back, because you had to first sweep the roads every morning to make sure there were no landmines. So you were actually driving at the pace of walking to get to the roads, to get to the point where you could go in and et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't easy. The helicopters changed that big time.
But I need to understand, you will get an RV point, and then you have to get your convoy there within a certain time, and then you wait.
Correct. They would wait there and they would wait for us. If we didn't get lost or a biffle didn't get stuck in the sand, sometimes you were stuck overnight because 2 biffles had gone too near to the shore and they'd be in the mud, and we then have to, with tow bars, we'd have to hook up sometimes 3, 4 biffles with an under, like a train, to get the one out of this deep mud. And so you didn't always get there. And as I think I said to you, they were sort of getting the rations out to the guys, which was sometimes, and anything that they needed in the bush. And as I said, the most important thing was the letters. It was more important than the food to get the letters to them. But it was sometimes you were stuck out for days longer than you planned. But then again, I said that all changed when they did with helicopters. It was just so easy to just fly past and drop everything that they needed at that stage. Yeah.
Now, the guys in the field at 3-2 were not wearing the normal browns.
No.
They did at times, but normally they had this camouflage.
Well, yes and no. In the beginning, the guys went over the border were in camis, and the guys south in the border were in browns. Obviously, if they bumped into other troops. And then, as far as I know, after our time, it worked. I think 32 basically only walked over the border, and the other regiments were south of the border. I don't think they did browns trainings in later years. I think we're just in camos and just doing the cross-border operations from there.
Which brings me to the next question. While you're there with your vehicles and you're going through, And suddenly you see these black guys arrive, and even the white guys will look black because they have black as beauty on. They probably carrying AK-47s. They have this not South African uniform. What the hell did go through your mind? I mean, are you not wondering you might have walked into enemy forces here just for the fleeting of a second?
We had radio contact and RVs with them all the time, so there was no doubt that you were coming into that when you trooped them and when you took them out. And the trooping also went. Buffalo Bay was too far away. That was Amoni, which I said to you, the base where I was the base NCO. That was basically a transit base. And then when they started trooping with helicopters, it became very, very quiet, and the recce group came into Amahoni and became their main base. The 32 recce guys made that their base to do most of the things as well. And after that, there were very few times that the troops came through because they were being trooped from Omega with the helicopters into their areas.
Yes, that's exactly the reason why I keep on asking about it, because it disappeared. It was spot, and then came the helicopters, and nobody ever talks about it, which is why I keep on talking. Now, there were never any blue-on-blue incidents with these supply columns.
Not that I know of, no. I don't know of any time that it went wrong, no. And the Air Force became, there was some Air Force guys that became very, very friendly. And there was I can't remember his name. There was one pilot, even when he picked up on the radio that a 32 platoon had trouble, he would divert from what he was doing and go and help 32. He had a name. He was very, very well known. And he was always crapped on for not doing what he was actually sending. When 32's on the radio and he helped, I'm dropping everything and did it. We got on very, very well with Air Force, and when they sometimes overnighted in the base, we're doing a big operations out of Ilundu, I think the base was called. No, Amahoni. And then sometimes the helicopters would have to go back at night and come in the mornings, and they would work with us. We worked there for, I think we did about a 6-week or 8-week operation out of there, which they were going in and out every day. And the recce group were doing a lot out of there as well.
I just want to mention here that Louis Botha, is it Botha or Botma? I'm always
Louis Botma.
Botma. He's the author of a Buffalo Strikel, I believe.
Yes.
One of those books, a very famous guy, very clever man. I think he's got a PhD in something. Very good fellow. It's fascinating to me how the same names always comes up. And you were in a position to know all of these people.
Yeah.
So, do you have any recollections of anything funny or something which we laugh about today, which happened to you?
Botma is an Afrikaner through and through. You can only speak Afrikaans to him. Everything he does, he comes from that culture. He's an amazing guy. As I think I might have said earlier, he's now living in Oranje. But he's got a heart of gold, and he's really dedicated from his books and what he does. And whenever we passed Bloemfontein, some guys used to meet him at the Wimpy, I think, on the National Road for coffee. And a couple of times we went to his house and stayed over with him and bride with him and everything. And and still a good mate today. When he was in the platoon, in my first platoon, doing basics. And there was another guy called Tim Stewart, I think I might have mentioned, became an athlete, and these two were brilliant at 2,4s and cross countries and everything. And they were great cross country and runners, anything 2,4. Yeah.
Do you think that the way that 3-2 Battalion was treated afterwards, do you think there's fairness in that?
Wow. I don't know. It was trying to accommodate them for what they did, but putting the base where they did, they were putting the basically in the middle of nowhere, and then they broke it up. I think they took some of the guys, didn't they call 4 recces? Weren't those 32 guys or 5 recces? Weren't they from 32? I think some went. They formed a recce group. 5 recce, yeah. yeah, some of them went away, and some of them just stayed in the base because they had nothing else to do, and that they couldn't get them out of there. Then I think the military stopped feeding them, and then there was some organizations feeding them. But at that stage, they also said that a very small amount were actually from 32. There were people from that area that were now coming into the base and trying to live off the supplies and everything else. And does it still exist? I don't even know if it still exists, Luatla. I don't know, or where they were. What is the base called they were in? Luatla.
No, Luatla is, I think, is for battle.
No, Luatla is the big training base. I'm not sure if they're even still in that base.
Yes, they got broken up. The regiment got basically disbanded. A lot of them went to normal infantry units, others went to the parachute battalions.
Correct. Yeah.
I remember in Parliament, one of the officers, former officers, gave or tried to give F.A. de Klerk 33 rand in coins, in silver coins or something, or 50.
That was at the closing down parade.
Yes.
It was down to say that, they collected, Willem Rutter collected the coins the night before. And then I think the night before. And the next day we had a big meeting and we went onto the tennis court and he tried to hand over these things, and the new commanding officer, I don't know who he was, refused to take the silver coins. So Willem Rutter still had them. And then years later, through a contact from, what's his name, the guy in Southwest Africa, he knew someone in Parliament, and he got this guy in Parliament to deliver these silver coins to the Parliament. And they weren't accepted. I think they were thrown back on the floor or something. It was quite an incident when they didn't accept the silver pieces. But that was quite a few years later that the pieces were actually handed over in Parliament and they weren't accepted. For the betrayal, as far as Willem Rutter was concerned, we were betrayed because it was not what they promised us and what they did.
Yes, it's Pomfret. That's the town where the battalion was taken to. It's a very sad story. That is one of the reasons why we try to raise money for the Free to Battalion Association, so that we can see if we can help people.
Yeah.
But I think we also now at the age where the leader group and the white people are also getting old and also getting in, some of them in positions where they actually do need help.
Correct.
Are you involved at all with the association?
I'm probably a member officially, but I'm not involved with it in South Africa. Sometimes I'm contacted about something in Europe, but the only group, there's this 4 or 5 of us in, there's a couple, and then there's Willem Rutter, there's myself, there's a guy who was a driver from Holland, and we still get together occasionally. But obviously for the last 2 years of Corona now, we haven't got together, and we used to try and always get together on Savati, the 21st of July, when Savati was, because that's when most of the other guys have a parade. Let's say for last year and this year, we didn't get together the last 2 years.
Yes, we are thinking on the channel to get the people of Savati together in a group, and then to speak to all of them to find out exactly what happened. Because Savati was, I think, the worst time for Free to Battalion in its history.
Savati was about 3 or 4 months after I left the battalion. I just left when that all happened, and only heard about it later. And I just remember walking in. I think it might have even been a week or so later after I left, because I remember eventually getting home from clearing out from Buffalo and Mahoney, and then eventually, I think I couldn't even get a train. I think I hitchhiked from Rundu back to Cape Town, and then when I got home the first Sunday that I got home, the back page of the Sunday Times was a whole thing about the Savati and all the guys who were killed and everything else. And then I basically lost it because I felt myself being a traitor. I'd left and I could have extended my time, and I had a huge inner battle with myself for leaving until I could accept to myself, life goes on, I've got to accept it. But the first thing when I saw that Sunday Times back page, I was flipped out completely.
I can well understand that, especially, and I keep on saying this to many people, because we have to remember we're not actually speaking to ourselves here. These conversations is for the people who follows us, We were not there. And a lot of things are not in the books, which is why I'm so grateful for people like you to speak to us. But there was a cult of silence in South Africa about the border war. And part of it was secrecy. Of course, there were military secrets around and you couldn't speak out. But the other part was, I feel, and I might be wrong, but people simply didn't care. They were simply not interested in what was happening up north. They had a normal life, they just didn't care.
They didn't know, and that was the frustration when you got back there. Is it was a very frustrating thing to see that how many people didn't realize that there were guys on the border day and night right across the border, all regiments that were up there, the guys doing their 3 months camps up there and everything. And there was just such a huge lot of people that I walked across that didn't know about it. Life was just going, and at some stage it did frustrate me. And I think I might have lost it once or twice, speaking to people who didn't actually realize this whole thing. Yeah, and but then again, we got involved. After that stage, I think, well, through the Cape Town Highlander was involved, and then we got very involved in Cape Town because of the township problems that we were having in the townships. And then we were doing township duties. I think I said the township duties, and I did one camp up in East London and Port Elizabeth of the townships. And that was the worst part of my military career. It was just horrible experience, just driving around in Buffels at night and not being able to do anything and whatever. So yeah, we tried to get involved in that system of the military. And by then I left South Africa in 2000, came to Europe. I went home for a couple of the Cape Town Highlanders birthday dinners. I attended some of them and 1 or 2 parades, and then I did the one parade. There might be a picture. I did a parade in Scotland. It was easy for me going from here and representing the regiment in Scotland when the Gordon Highlanders got their new colours, and eventually the amalgamation of the Gordon Highlanders. And then when the Gordon Highlanders fell away, there was no more affiliation for me in that part of the military. And the Cape Town Highlanders had changed so. I remember arriving in Cape Town shortly after that, and we used to always meet on Tuesday nights in the regiment. I rode into the regiment to surprise the guys in the mess, and there was no one there. There were just some of the band guys practicing from the band. I said, "Where's it?" No, they don't have meetings anymore every Tuesday. They only have a meeting when they have to. And again, just where's the camaraderie that was in the regiment and everything? So it was different. So it's hard to accept these things at the time, and I was upset again when that didn't happen and walked away. But you have to accept these things, that times change and things change. And I think we also used to go in voluntary. We weren't paid for it. And I think also these nights, the guys in the army wanted to be paid for it. And whatever. And they said they're not paying them to come on Tuesday nights. I can understand from the military side, they said they're not having these meetings. Yes, it was couldn't take, but I've no regrets. Everything happened for a reason. I had a blessed military career and still part of the veterans in Europe with the 32 Battalion. And it's fantastic. Even if there is only 3 or 8 of us getting together, it's still a wonderful, wonderful brotherhood at 32 Battalion.
I remember seeing some pictures, must have been about 1974, perhaps 75, of a train pulling out of Cape Town Station with a Highlanders on it. They're hanging out there out of the window, waving goodbye. And there was almost like a band playing. It was a big deal. These lads were going to war. And that disappeared. After a while, that type of thing stopped. Nobody cared. People just went on. But can you give me a background, a history of that regiment? Because I think you have that famous historian there, Steenkamp, Major Steenkamp, don't you?
Yeah, Willem Steenkamp.
Regiment. Willem Steenkamp. Yeah, he wrote many, many books, all of them fantastic.
Yeah. He was an officer in the Cape Town Highlanders, officer, and yeah, heart and soul in the Cape Town Highlanders. There was a book written by one of the older OCs before he wrote his book, which was also very good, from the First World War and from the starting of the regiment. I think the regiment was founded in 1899 or somewhere around that stage. The Cape Town Highlanders was come together, and that was fighting, I think it was in Cape Town, where they were protecting the Malay quarters or fighting the Malay quarters, something like that. The old slaveries or something, when the first regiment, their first military duty. Yeah, and then it went through the First World War history, and went through the Second World War history, and then went through the Border War history. So it's all very different. When we had dinner with the old men from the war sitting up in the desert, a lot of them would say, we have no idea, we have no idea, we were only on the border, and things like that. So they did have that thing. But what I did at the Captain Highlanders dinners is most of the young guys would sit at a table, and they would hide bottles of wine under the table, extra bottles they could drink in it. And I made a point of every single time to try and join another table of these old men from the war. And I had a fantastic time hearing their stories and everything. And then I was asked to be the guest speaker at one of the dinners, and to speak about Alamein. And I basically had to find out the facts about Alamein to be talking about Alamein. And basically my speech, the way I prepared it, the way I'd studied it, I had these old veterans in tears, and now I'm really in tears. Excuse me.
Yes, Alamein was where Rommel got stopped, I believe, by Montgomery. And it was fascinating because the South Africans played a big role there. I had an uncle at Alamein, I don't know which regiment, probably armor, because he was a bit otherwise. If I say uncle, I mean my dad's, like dad's uncle. And he said they were shooting that night. They had 999 cannon, and they were shooting non-stop. He said it looked like daylight. They were just shooting all the time. So Alamein plays a major role for South Africa, South African Armed Forces, and there were a lot of them in those regiments which you are talking about. We should never forget our old soldiers. That's a sad thing to me, you know. You see this old guy walking down, and you forget he was once a young, strong man, and he did marvelous things.
At one of the Alamein dinners, I think one of the old men spoke as a guest speaker, and he spoke about eventually when the last man dies, it's going to disagree, it's going to not happen anymore. And I stood up and I said, even when the last man dies and I'm in Cape Town, I will make sure the dinner happens. I think the dinner does still happen in the Cape Town Highlanders. As far as I know, it still happens. And you know, that's the time when we remember the people that passed. And I remember my speech that I made, promising the guys this. I can't remember everything I said, but I basically had the old men in tears by my speech. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, giving a speech to these men who fought in this war in North Africa. Yeah, but yeah, I've had a wonderful career. I've seen the world, and we're still brothers in Europe. And if I come to Cape Town or South Africa, we're still brothers. And some of my best friends, my colleague, Louis Bortner, these guys that I've known for years. I said, Eben Swanepoel, who we were in the same bungalow together in basics at infantry school, just wonderful brotherhoods, and there's many of them. And I think from that side, I have no regrets about my military career, and I'm proud of it. And I'm proud of all my brothers in every regiment that I've served in.
I think that the politicians, I spoke to one of your nurses yesterday, Jennifer Holloway. She's now something else, she married again, parents. The episode might be out before this one or not, I don't know. And we came to an agreement, I would say, where she said that, well, I said that the politicians just start something and they don't realize what they start. And I think if you look back and you speak to any soldier, anyone who's in combat, he will value life. And he would say to you, don't go that route. If it's at all possible, just solve it, just talk about it. Would you agree with that type of view, looking back as a combat soldier?
I would think you have to keep talking, because keep talking is healthy. It gets what's on your heart and on your mind out. I think if you block it up, I think it's where anything in life is bad if you keep it to yourself and you hold it back. And the same, as I said, I think some people, it's just because it's so badly looked on, don't want to talk about it. And I've never looked on it badly, and I'm going to every parade and I'll talk about it. I'll give speeches about it. I've got no regrets about it.
Yes, and I want to ask you, how is the European attitude towards the South African former soldiers? Do they understand anything? Do they have knowledge?
I have no contact with anybody here that's got to do with the military or has had anything. And because they're a country that's in peace, and I think they've done some overseas duties here, but I've never met any here. And the only guys that I'm obviously still in contact with are any of the 3-2 guys, or South African guys that are here. But it's basically just the 3-2 guys that I still have contact with. Yeah, it's I can only talk about the 3-2 guys. I have no idea where any of the other guys are. 1 or 2 guys have written to me about something or asked a question on the internet, but I can't remember who they are. That weren't in 32.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we started this program is because I was accused of being on the bad side. And then they came out with all sorts of liberal crap, telling me how we murdered people. And then I said to them, that's highly disciplined police, highly disciplined army. Give me the facts. Don't tell me the nonsense. Tell me this day, this year. So they started with Kasinga in 78. And I'm glad to say we had people from Kasinga on the show and we disapproved it. So I think there's a huge amount of a lack of knowledge about what actually happened in South Africa during those years.
Well, it was Angola and Cuba. And Cuba started arming them. And the logical thing was, instead of trying to keep them from South African borders coming across to their communism, it's easier to stop them in Southwest Africa. It wasn't to protect South Africa, it was to protect South Africa in Southwest Africa in a way, but it was to protect South Africa. The further we can keep them away, the better for our country. And that is why I understand why the border war actually started, was because Fidel Castro started mixing into the military in Angola.
Yes, and the problem, of course, also was that Namibia, Southwest Africa, was officially, legally, under the protection of South Africa. You could not just open the borders and say, come in and murder and kill like you want to. It's complex. It's more complex than I think that the average European or American can understand. Yeah. But that's also fine because, you know what, they understand their own history, and why should they understand South Africa's history if you think about it? Yeah. You mentioned something interesting in the beginning to me. I made a note, the Cape Argus. Yes. I believe that is where you met your wife. Now, the Cape Argus is a bicycle race, isn't it?
Yes.
Quite a famous one.
Yes.
So were the two of you on bicycles?
My wife?
Well, you and your wife, or your wife alone?
No. I used to go alone to Cape Town to do the Argus cycle tour. And there was one cycle tour we did with about 4 or 5 32 guys, Gary Swart and I can't remember who else came. There were a couple of guys did it, but I got them bicycles to do it, and they both never did it again. Who's the main guy in Southwest Africa who organized everything? I can't remember his name now. Blonde-haired guy, glasses, Southwest Africa. Button Haynes and Gary. I got them bicycles and they did the Argus one year. And yeah, that was fun as well down in Cape Town.
Man, that's quite a long ride. I mean, it's not just from here to a local cafe. I mean, unless they practice, they must have suffered.
If you do it for fun, you've got 8-10 hours to do it. I'm saying the professionals finish it in a couple of hours and whatever. And it's just the fun and the camaraderie on the trip and all the people you're talking to and passing and going. And I just think is a great thing to do. I haven't done one for many years. I don't even know if it still exists. But it was a great time doing August in my time.
You never tried the Camaraderie, which is also linked to the military, of course.
No, that's running. I'm not into running. I'm in bicycle. I did one bicycle race in Germany, up in which town was it? Wo war dieser Fahrradrennen in Deutschland? Hamburg. In Hamburg, I did one bicycle race, and I've never done another one in Germany.
Well, this is fascinating. I can tell you, there's a story. They say that old soldiers never die; they just fade away. But I think that when we hear memories like yours, there's no fading away because it will be enjoyed. as long as we can.
They don't fade away. I've been to parades where the guys in the front are walking with walking sticks, and they are brilliant, and they hobbling along, and they do come. A lot of the older people, when it hasn't for the last couple of years, when you go to IPA for the parade in IPA every year, the old men basically they get given seats now. They sit down, and obviously the fit guys march through, and then 1 or 2 representatives put their wreaths in the memorial at IPA. And IPA is fantastic. It's a fantastic thing. Obviously, the last 2 years no IPA. Otherwise, every single year I'm in IPA.
So if somebody is listening here and he wants to go and look at this parade, I think IPA is spelled like in Afrikaans uitpres.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You're saying it in a French way. Are we welcome there? Can they just go? Or do we need some permission?
Anybody can go there. First, the regiments form up and march through, and the people who are visiting, they stand on the side of the road where all the regiments march through with their colours, and then they wait for them to march out after the parade again, and then you meet up in the town. Everybody standing in the pubs and standing the night before as well. And that day, you're meeting people all over, and people walk up and ask you questions about your uniform or your hat and whatever. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful day in Belgium.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've seen the parades, but I'm wondering, yeah, when you get together there as a regiment, who takes command? How do you organize this to get into the companies and then start marching? Somebody has to say something really.
In front of you, there's the military guys, and then there's just all the civilians with their blazers. And you just stand with your mates. And because we have a color, the colors are right in front. And because I know the system, I get up there quite early with the colors. So we're pretty much in near right in front, because we carry our flag on the parade as well. So we're pretty much in the front of the parade. And yes, because the military guys with the blazers, they're there, and then the civilian guys more behind you who sort of march on, sort of as organized as us. And sometimes they're Boy Scouts in the group or things like that. But in the front is us with our colors. And then you march through the arch, and the colors are put down, and then the whole parade in the arch. And it's a fantastic time. And it's very, very, for me, moving when the trumpeter plays the last post in this whole building. It's just moving. All you hear is this trumpet. It's amazing.
I spoke to a few former soldiers who contacted me. They're very negative, very angry. And they're angry and negative for a lot of reasons. What would you say it would be a good thing for them actually to attend something like this? Not just stand and look, get your medals out, go there and show the world that you once were a soldier. You were a proud man once.
I think everybody in his own heart has got to do, but if they're angry about it, it's going to be difficult to put on their things. But if they realize that in places like IPA at a parade, you're all remembered, and that's a positive thing. And after the parade or the night before, as I said, when the guys asking you, what did you do, South Africa, where were you, what did you do? And then you speak to the old man about his time in the Second World War. There's no more First World War guys there. Long ago, there were still 1 or 2 First World guys there. World War. For me as a soldier, it's just amazing to look after the veterans. And it's exactly the same with our little 3-2 group here in Germany and Europe with Willem Ratter and all the guys. It's just great that the brotherhood still stays. And for me, you brothers until you go to your grave. It's not just a thing that ends when you leave the regiment.
Do you think this brotherhood depends on having been in combat, or can it be for those who were not in combat? It's not their fault. I mean, for the average guy on the border would never have even seen a terrorist ever.
For me, it doesn't matter, because I've always had, when I've had this conversation, I've always said, guys, for every guy out there, there's 8 guys behind you. And if your food didn't arrive, and as I think I said to you earlier, if the post didn't arrive, that poor clerk in Rundu got shat on from everywhere. The goldest thing before the food was the post. You get the letters from home, from your parents, your girlfriends. The postman didn't do his job, and everybody had to do their job that came there. So to me, for every guy up front, there are 8 guys behind you to support you in what you're doing up front.
That's very true. I keep on saying to people, yeah, you were not unimportant. Whatever role you played, you know, it's a small thing perhaps for you, but for other people it means so much. And you should be proud.
Yeah, I'm proud and have no regrets at all. No, I think it's a great life. I was privileged in every way, and I was lucky to have landed where I did. I was privileged to have been an instructor at infantry school. I was very privileged to have served in 32 Battalion, and incredible. And to belong to the brotherhood of ex-military guys, whether they were SADF, whether they were 32 Battalion, whether they're old veterans that I meet in APA from the Second World War. There's no First World War ones there who are still a couple in their wheelchairs through. It's a privilege to go to these guys and to ask them what they did in their war as well. And the old men tell you what they did in Africa. So for me, every soldier I respect from every regiment, even if you were on the enemy side, everybody at that stage did something for what him was correct.
I'm tempted to say amen, because I've never really found any hostility between the groups. Everybody says we were fighting for what we believe in, not personal. And now we're friends, now we have a beer together, and we sometimes laugh about certain things. Well, we've come to the end of an hour. I must tell you people, I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I really liked speaking to people like him. And I want to say to all of you, you are not unimportant. Come and talk to me. Tell me your story. It's really not a big deal. I mean, you just write me an email. I'll get back to you. And then it's a matter of talking and editing, and off you go. And, you know, in a few years from now, perhaps your grandchildren or somebody else will learn something about history. And that's how you live on. So thank you, Kim. Thank you very much. We will get hold of Willem Ratte at some stage. We did contact him. He was just a bit busy last year, but we will get hold of him. He's a legend as well. I'm really glad I've met you. Frans Fourie talked about you, and he talked highly about you, which is, well, coming from that guy, I think it's quite an honor.
It is an honor. It's an honor to have served in the regiment. It's an honor to have served with him. And it's an honor to have done this interview with you. And I thank you very much for taking the time and inviting me.
Thanks, Kim. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
God bless.
We'll see you. Thanks.